But here's a question I haven't heard one person on television ask. How come the flu vaccine comes out every year like clockwork and we don't seem to hear about testing and phase 1, 2, 3? Why wouldn't they immediately allow this as long as it's voluntary and say, look, we've used the same technology. All we did was we swapped the wild variant for the new variant, and it's the same kind of vaccine again. But nobody's talking about that.
We have a doctor on the line, I believe. Do we have him?
We have him.
We are going to go to Senator Rand Paul. All right. Senator Rand Paul, he is on Twitter at Rand Paul. Let me first, before I bring him on, he recently, I can't get enough of it. We've been watching these clips on this show.
He's fantastic.
If Rand Paul ever retires, we'll lose just like Cuomo. If Cuomo is gone, we've lost like 30% of our content. And if Rand Paul retires, we'll get we'll lose about 20% of our mic drops.
I know, we need them.
Or if Fauci runs out of podlings.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, I love that he just makes Fauci just nervous.
I know.
And answer questions.
So let's just go right here where he was, Rand Paul recently, he blasted Fauci, used that term appropriately, on Fox and Friends about Fauci, claiming to be the science.
This is a very, very dangerous sort of idea. The idea that a government bureaucrat represents science and that he is now untouchable. Over 100 million Americans have had COVID. They have natural immunity. There's a real question about whether they should be vaccinated once, twice, or not at all. And the thing is, there's never been a debate because he's the all-powerful scientist. You're not to question him, just do as you're told.
And now we have him. I wanted to make sure the line was all set up here because we've had some problems recently with the Skypeness. Senator Rand Paul, can you see me or hear me, sir?
I can see you. I'm just disappointed that I don't get any intro music. What? No theme? I've been on the show enough. I should have my own music. Come on.
Well, you know what? We'll make sure that it's Bon Jovi's Dead or Alive or Alice Cooper's Poison. Be sure to bring a poll. I have got let me just ask you this right off the bat, because you happen to be the person who's in the line of fire when Fauci makes the stupidest comments. Why do you think he has such confidence that he is, quote unquote, the science?
You know, I think it goes along with the personality. He's a government bureaucrat. I mean, he works for the government. He's a physician. But I think government attracts people who think government is the answer. So I think whatever the question is you ask him, he's going to think government is the answer. And usually the answer involves coercion. It involves restricting your liberty. And frankly, he doesn't give a damn about your liberty. It's not in his wheelhouse. His wheelhouse is restricting your liberty.
Right.
And so I guess I'm not surprised by it. But the thing is I think the arrogance, he doesn't realize the arrogance of saying he is the science. And also the irony that if he is the science and he is the government and the government determines what is the correct science, that it really is akin to the medieval church deciding what is and what isn't true.
Yeah. Well, when he claimed that he was the science, you just saw kids drop out of the STEM fields in record numbers. Let me ask you this, because, you know, the Omicron variant, people are talking about this right now. And I was talking about this as it was happening live while we were on air. And they were saying, will the vaccine work with the Omicron variant? Will it evade the vaccine? I noticed no one was asking about whether it would evade natural immunity. Did you notice that? And what do you think the motive is for that? It was striking to me that it didn't even seem like it was a question on the table.
Well, what was most striking is that we're jumping to hysteria before anyone even knows if it's deadly or not. Is it more or less deadly than what we've currently got? And before you say, oh, give them a booster, this is Fauci's immediate response, give them a booster. Well, does it evade the vaccine completely? If it is, the booster would be a waste of time. So we need to know, is it more or less deadly? If it's more deadly, I think the best thing government can do is get out of the way of the development of a new vaccine or new monoclonal antibodies. But even that's premature because we don't yet know whether it's more or less deadly than what we've already got.
Well, this whole confusion could have started, the booster confusion could have been started by Fauci wanted to ride in the back of an Explorer and needed a seat. He just said, oh, is there a booster? And then everyone said, oh, we need boosters every 6 months. And he had to go along with it to save face. Do you think there's a financial incentive? Look, I don't want to be conspiratorial, but people obviously look at the stock prices of Moderna. These are issues that have been brought up. Do you think there is a financial incentive, at least as it relates to the legislation for COVID vaccines?
I think the question at least should be asked. I mean, for example, the government bought all the vaccines, the government bought all the monoclonal antibodies. Since the government now owns it, do they feel somehow compelled to use it up before we get any new stuff, even if it's not working very well? I think that question ought to be asked. The Delta variant vaccine we have had for at least 4 or 5 months now. It's been in phase 1, 2, 3 trials. It's in the system.
Hold on, Senator Rand Paul, because you just touched on something. A lot of people are hearing this for the first time. They're going, what does he mean? He means the vaccine if it works again. Explain, because most people don't know what you mean by Delta variant vaccine. That's a big deal.
Right. So the vaccine that we have now was developed a year and a half ago, and it was related to the wild type, the first type of virus we got. The virus mutated, and last summer the Delta variant took over. So almost all the infections in the United States and around the world are the Delta variant. The old vaccine really probably provides you some protection from hospitalization and death, but it's not stopping the transmission of this, and it's imperfect. I mean, I think it's still better than nothing, particularly if you're in a high risk category. It's better than nothing. But the vaccine has evaded, the virus has evaded the vaccine. So they can sequence these viruses like this Omicron. They've sequenced it within days. Yeah. That means they could be developing a vaccine next week. And they're all saying, oh, it'll take too long, it'll take too long. Well, we've had a vaccine to the Delta variant for several months now. It's in testing. But here's a question I haven't heard one person on television ask. How come the flu vaccine comes out every year like clockwork, and we don't seem to hear about testing and phase 1, 2, 3? Why wouldn't they immediately allow this, as long as it's voluntary, and say, look, we've used the same technology. All we did was we swapped the wild variant for the new variant, and it's the same kind of vaccine again. But nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about letting that come to the public, and it might be enough to actually stop the vaccine the way it was originally. The first vaccine was working.
Well, I don't want to get too serious here, but what you actually just brought up is scary to me. And not, good points that you brought up, but here's my concern in hearing what you're talking about. You're saying they've developed the Delta vaccine months ago, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Months ago, they were telling us, Dr. Fauci was telling us that the vaccine was perfectly effective against the Delta variant. Why would they be developing something new while telling the American public that there was no need for its development? That, to me, is terrifying.
Well, I think part of the reason you develop it is you develop it while also testing to see if your vaccine works. And so it is a judgment call. How well does the current vaccine work against the Delta variant? It works to a certain extent, but each month we've heard a little bit lower percentages. Originally, the vaccine would stop 90% of people from getting infected. Yeah. Then this one was 60. It's more like it's about 60 or 70% with the Delta variant. My guess is that if you had a specific vaccine for the Delta variant, you'd go back up closer to the 90% again. And probably rotating in new vaccines periodically like we do for the flu would probably be a good idea. But isn't it amazing that all of the prognosticators across all of the different realms of the news media, nobody's asking why we don't have the Delta variant vaccine and why we didn't use it? And that question then comes is, are they worried about getting rid of all the inventory of the vaccine they already bought? Is that their concern versus going to something that would be more effective?
Well, but they were telling people proactively that it was effective. And actually with the Delta variant, Mayo did a study with, and I'm familiar with Mayo because they just had titanium rods put in. And if Mayo says something, I typically give them a lot of credence. Mayo knows their stuff. They did a study with 50,000 people, and I can't remember if it was the Moderna or Pfizer. One of them was 60 or 70% effective against the Delta. One of them was I think it was 42%. This was very, very quickly after the Delta variant came out. And I was always amazed because no one talked about it, and we could get in trouble on YouTube for citing that study from Mayo when it came out. Until now, they say, all right, you're allowed to cite that study. It's just interesting to me that they were developing a vaccine for Were you about to ask something there, Gerald? Okay, and I know Dave had a question. My two guys here, they said, you have Rand Paul on? We have a bunch of questions. I was like, well, he's a busy man.
Well, I have two questions. I'll go ahead and ask both of them at the same time. One is, why aren't we talking about natural immunity, right? You've had COVID. The durability of that has always been the question.
I already asked that, Gerald.
No, I know. But
don't waste his time. He's a doctor and a senator. He's not your plaything.
Where I'm going with this is, if we've had time to do all of this testing, like you said, we can sequence stuff in days. We can have alternative vaccines ready for Delta variants. Why haven't we be able to have we not been able to do the research to find out, is this durable? Because every time he talks about it, he says, well, the durability is the question.
Well, I already asked that question. What's your second question? I apologize for
Stop
his dumbass. What's the next question?
I didn't hear an answer to that question.
Fine, I'm sorry. My show's been hijacked.
I think one of the things that's important about all of the vaccination hysteria and the hysteria over this is that they're conditioning you for submission. It isn't so much about the science or saving your life or anything. It's conditioning you about submission. So, for example, the idea that we should mandate the vaccine on children is based on an ignorance or an ignoring of the natural immunity of 100 million people. But here's the other thing. Every day on CNN, I hate to bring it up, this horrible network that doesn't tell the truth and spreads misinformation, every day they say, oh my goodness, we don't have enough people vaccinated. That's why we need a mandate. I just looked at the CDC website just a few minutes ago. Between the ages of 64 and 75, 99.9% of people have chosen to get vaccinated. Can you imagine that? Almost everybody between the ages of 64 and 75 have gotten vaccinated. Over age 75, it's 97%. Over age 50, it's 87%. There's no lack of people being vaccinated in our country. So why do they want a mandate? To condition you to submit, to condition you to that the central authorities will make the decisions of your health care. And that's what this is about.
Yeah.
And that's why we should resist, because we may eventually get beyond this, but they're going to want to tell you to do something else in your health care when they're done telling you to get the COVID vaccine.
Hey, Senator Rand Paul, I just want to ask you, do you remember when Fauci mocked you for talking about herd immunity? Yeah, I don't know if you remember that. He mocked you for it. And then he claimed that we needed 70% for herd immunity. And, now we're with old people higher. But do you remember that when he mocked you?
I try to forget the mocking, but here's what I would say is it's important for people to try to get their news, and we can talk about things on here, hopefully, that aren't being talked about. Here's another one. If you look on the official websites of the incidence of the disease by state and the death rate, something extraordinary happened in New York, and I think it does have to do with herd immunity. If you look at the death rate in New York, it's been on the x-axis for a year or more. They had that huge spike, when Cuomo tried to kill everybody in the nursing homes.
Right.
But this huge spike, a lot of New York got this. There were parts of New York, 30 or 40% of New York may have gotten it. My guess is it may be what we should be doing are antibody studies to see how many people have had it in New York. Because I'll bet you 50, maybe over 50% of New York's had it now. And you see the death rate. It's right along the x-axis. Well, everybody else has been going up and doing all this. New York hasn't really suffered an increase in death rate, because they had such an enormous death rate at the beginning,
right?
But they also got their herd immunity at that time as well.
But they did see a spike in cases, which is why it's interesting as far as we're talking about the Delta vaccine not being very effective against transmission. You see that in a lot of states where they reached a very high level of vaccinations, as well as countries with a very high level of vaccinations, they did see a spike in case rates. Now, some of that could be seasonal, but you actually don't see that same acute spike in some places where they didn't necessarily have mandates or the same rates. The point is, you can't make an argument. What I'm saying is I'm not making an argument one way or the other, but one can certainly not make the argument that reaching a threshold of this vaccine lowered case rates. And that, to me, is concerning.
And the other mistake with ignoring natural immunity is that since it's so potent and probably better than vaccinated, if we want to get to herd immunity, the natural immunity is incredibly important. Yeah. It isn't wishing that people get sick or get the disease, but the fact that they do, particularly those who don't get too sick and don't die, like the younger people, is actually better for society. The more people that have had the infection and survived, and that's really how we get beyond this, is when our natural immunity gets to a point. Because in all likelihood, we're going to find that natural immunity is significantly longer. It already, we think, is better, but I think we're going to find that it lasts into the years, whereas the vaccine lasts 6 months, then you get another one, then it lasts 2 months, then you get another one, then it lasts 2 weeks. And before you know it, Fauci will be mandating that we get vaccinated, weekly, which is ridiculous.
Well, that's just because it's his hobby. I have a couple of questions here. First off, you're saying hopefully when we find out, and Dave, I do want to get to your question, but I might not be able to because I know the senator has to go, saying when we find out about natural immunity. Why don't we? Do we have an answer how many people have recontracted COVID who had natural immunity? Does that answer exist from the CDC right now?
The only place you can get it actually is from the big Israeli study, showing hundreds of thousands of people that have not been vaccinated. They've kept track of it. The CDC doesn't keep track of it.
Oh.
They have no idea. But see, once again, you have to realize they don't care about the science. They care about conditioning you to accept what you're being told. And it's better to have, from their perspective, one size fits all, because we are considered to be ignoramuses, deplorable, unwashed, maybe even Republican. They don't want these people to make their decisions. They think you shouldn't think about this. Just everybody should be vaccinated.
Yeah.
But it turns out it's not good science, and I think people will reject it the more they hear about it.
Well, I will tell you this, and then I'll go to Dave's question, and I'll leave you with a very short question. But my father, my mother got it. My wife had it. We only found out because I was feeling sick. And my wife said, you probably have COVID. So we scheduled to go in the same day. She said, if you have it, I probably have it. I was feeling sick. She was not. She walked past me at the clinic and she said, yeah, I tested positive. So you likely have it. And I went in, the one feeling sick, and I did not. And then they said, well, you know what? It's just treat it like a positive because you're living with someone who has it. So, don't see your kids for 10 days and don't go to work. And we had just had twins, baby girl. And so then when it came to monoclonal antibodies, turns out I didn't have it, by the way, which I don't understand because I was sleeping with my wife who had it and we did stuff. They said monoclonal antibodies, when we went there, they said, hey, do you have a positive test? And I told them, I said, well, no, but they told me to treat it as a positive. And so they want this risk on one side of it, but they don't understand the risk that Americans are incurring. Just don't work for 2 weeks. Just don't see your kids. And so my question is, considering all of these strains have been put on Americans and they feel it, now there's the Omicron variant. And Dave, we'll talk about it after I can't get to your question. Is there, while we're talking about science, is there any scientific indication that the Omicron variant is more deadly than previous strains, more of a concern? Is this something new? Because I notice they're not talking about it so much on CNN. Nothing this morning.
Nobody knows. I mean, we'll know more in a couple of weeks, and that's why any pronouncements now are premature and based just on sort of the proclivities of people to want to control your behavior. But there's no evidence yet, and we'll know in a week or two. And if this is the Black Plague, I'm open to discussion as to what we should do. But if it's less serious, there are a few brave doctors who have said if it's less serious and very contagious, the fact that even more natural immunity will be spread very quickly through this, if it's less deadly, it could be a silver lining, to this thing coming over here. But the other thing is, it's already here. The banning travel is not going to work. I've never been for banning travel, whether it was a previous administration or this administration. It just doesn't work, frankly. But it cripples the economy of tourism. And the more they want to poke and prod us, the less that people like me who are independent-minded don't want to go anywhere. I mean, I'm not going to travel outside the U.S. if they're going to poke and prod me before I can come back in. So, frankly, they're going to just continue to hurt things around the world as long as they overreact to things.
Well, poking and prodding is kind of the raison d'etre for Fauci. Spent a lot of time in bathhouses. Senator Rand Paul, that's true. You guys can look it up. He wrote about it. Thank you so much, sir. I know you're busy. I appreciate you actually, relaying some scientific information here for our audience.
Thanks for having me. And next time I expect to have a musical intro, all right?
Yes, it will be Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi. Just make sure to bring the tassels. Senator Rand Paul, everybody. Let me know what you thought. Comment below on the on Dr. Rand Paul. Is that what's going on?
Oh no.
What's happening?
Where's that son of a bitch Rand Paul at?
Oh no,
I got something to tell him.
No, I don't care.
Judge Fauci.
I'm the science.
Judge Fauci.
He's an eye doctor, and I save AIDS, baby.
Watch Louder with Crowder live, Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern.